Star Trek Discovery, Season 5, Episode 9, Lagrange Point. The episode begins with Saru at Federation headquarters, holding a bouquet of flowers for his bride-to-be, the President of Navarre, Tarina. They have a meeting with the Federation president to discuss the Breen problem. Somehow, word got out that Mal offed Rune, and now Primarch Tahal is intending to take Rune's soldiers for herself, to strengthen her bid for the throne of the Breen Imperium. This means Tahal is going to go after Mal, who's going after the Progenitor's tech, and that's where Discovery is heading. The Federation has been trying to contact Tahal and slow her down so Discovery can get the Progenitor's tech without having to face Mal and Tahal. Tahal ignores the Federation's attempts at contact, so it's decided that Saru will take a shuttle and try to make contact in person. Mal will reach the location of the Progenitor's tech in 15 minutes, but Discovery's jump navigation is still malfunctioning. Stamets will have to do his best to get Discovery where they need to go because they have run out of time. They land in the gravity distortions of binary black holes. They manage to get clear and determine that the Progenitor's tech is in the Lagrange point between the binary black holes. They scan and find what looks like a giant barrel. They stare at the thing and speculate about it and waste time. This was so stupid. While they're wasting time running their stupid mouths, Mal shows up and snatches the thing from right in front of them. Discovery needs to figure out how to snatch it back. Lucky for them, Mal's dreadnought just stays there while trying to figure out the barrel and how to get the Progenitor's tech. Mal also takes this time to store Locke's body in a portable pattern buffer so he'll stay fresh. Discovery needs to get the barrel from Mal, so their plan is to use the gap in the Dreadnought's shield at their tailpipe to get into the Dreadnought, take down the Dreadnought's shield, and beam out the barrel and those who sneak on board to carry out the mission. Michael Burnham, Book, Reese, and Adira are going to take a shuttle to fly up the Dreadnought's tailpipe. Adira is going, so Adira can take down the shield. Stamets and Culber have a moment with Adira before letting Adira go to do Adira's job. So they fly up the tailpipe. When the shuttle is about to be destroyed by the heat, the quartet beams aboard the Breen ship. As they make their way through the ship, Michael Burnham takes time out of their life or death mission to pull Book aside and talk about their feelings. They both say they were afraid of failing the other, and that's why their relationship failed. Really deep introspection there. Meanwhile, the map to the Progenitor's tech was also a key to unlock the barrel. Mal loses a few soldiers as they get sucked into the barrel, which turns out to be an interdimensional gateway. There's some sort of quarantine shield around the barrel that's inconveniently turned on when Michael Burnham and Book go to put the transport device on the barrel. Their plan takes just a little too long, and Michael Burnham and Book get caught. Over the open comm, Burnham talks in code as a signal to Raynor. He gets the message, which is to rip through the Dreadnought's shuttle bay containment field, blowing everything into space, and they're going to beam Michael Burnham, Book, and the barrel on board Discovery. Adira and Reese will be beamed aboard from the bridge as soon as the shields go down. So they set course for the Breen shuttle bay and prepare to keep firing with everything they've got. The plan goes into motion. In the ensuing chaos, Mal leaps into the interdimensional portal in the barrel, and Michael Burnham follows her. Discovery flies into the Breen shuttle bay, firing as they go. There are a bunch of explosions and debris flying everywhere. Discovery retrieves Book, Adira, and Reese, but the barrel flies out into space and ruptures, leaving a portal in its place. Tilly scans the portal and says there's no sign of Michael Burnham, she's just gone. Book insists that Michael Burnham is still alive. After pacing the bridge for the entire episode, Raynor declares that they're going to get their captain back, sits in the captain's chair and says, "Let's do this." The end. This felt like an episode that didn't need to exist. I think they were trying to stretch the material that they had into 10 episodes, because this didn't need to happen. They could have had 9 episodes in this season. This episode didn't matter. They set up this situation so that Discovery would just sit there and look at this stupid barrel. Mal would retrieve it right out from under their noses, and then they had to go through this stupid bullshit just to get it back. Again, they made the characters stupid on purpose so that they could have this episode. That's just garbage writing. I mean, that said, I've seen the going up the tailpipe maneuver before. That's nothing new. I saw it on Space Command, which actually stars Doug Jones, so I found that a bit ironic. Honestly, they're setting up a bunch of dramatic situations that don't need to happen. For instance, how did Tahal find out that Rune was dead? How did anybody? Why did anybody from Mal's ship broadcast that information? That just seemed like a forced error on Mal's part. She seemed a lot more competent before this episode than she seems now. So I really don't have too much to say about this episode other than this was schlocky. Michael Burnham pulling Book aside to have that conversation about their relationship while they're on the Breen ship in the middle of this extremely important mission was ridiculous. This episode it didn't need to exist. It was really a waste of time. There was nothing established here other than Book and Michael Burnham having that moment together. Michael Burnham and Mal jumping through that portal. That's it. That's where we stand with this. It was a waste.
Why is this even Mal's ship to begin with? I understand the story she's giving is that she was the wife of Locke. But other than a tattoo on each of them, there's no proof of that. And even if there was, I don't know why she would be running anything. She doesn't really understand Breen culture. But this is just contrived so that you can have this strong female character being integral to the latter part of this story. I do have some positive things to say about this episode, but it's mostly in the visual realm. For instance, there were several shots of the Breen environmental suits when they were standing around that interdimensional device and the light was hitting them from the side, or when they were in corridors and light was coming in, where you could actually see surface to their outfits, their environmental suits. And I state that because it made the environmental suits not look as cheap. Because all season, these suits look like GIMP suits. And I'm not even exaggerating. That's what they look like to me. Whereas in this episode, they actually look like a mixture of environmental and armor because the light was picking up surface details of the armor, and it looked good. So I'm giving credit for that.
Well, for full disclosure, Jonathan Frakes did direct this episode. So in some respects, yeah, for instance, the cinematography was better in this. It was an improvement, but that bar was so low that just about anything would be better.
The shots of the environmental suits / armor, I actually think that's a real compliment because it was well done. Those looked like something I would have maybe seen in The Expanse or something. They looked like money was spent on those suits. And maybe those suits all along had that detail. It's just previously in this season, you had people directing that were so incompetent that it just looked like cosplay at a GIMP convention. It really looked that bad. The visuals on those suits, that caught my eye, and that happened the entire episode, and I really feel it deserves credit. I only wish they would have shot it that way the whole season so it wouldn't look like cartoon characters, which is how I treated the Breen through most of this season.
And I'll admit that the CGI that they did for the binary black holes and the Lagrange point, that actually looked pretty cool. And at the end, when the barrel went out and exploded into the portal, that looked really good too. So I can see where they spent their effort, and probably a lot of money, was in making this episode visually look better. I don't know who gets to prioritize that kind of stuff.
I think the first episode, when they had that Indiana Jones setting, when they were on that planet with all the sand, and this episode, I think this is where the majority of their money was spent.
I think so too, because it did visually look better. So I'll give them that. It really hit home how it's a shame that they wasted this series on such crap stories and, for the most part, crap characters. Because Reese, even though he didn't have all that much to do in this episode. He was in this episode. And again, I find him to be far more compelling than the characters that they have been focusing on since season 1. And apparently he's been there this whole time. So why did they wait this long to actually give him proper screen time like this?
Because this was the Michael Burnham show.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to be necessarily insulting. The people behind this series believe this show is all about Michael Burnham. She is the center of everything. When you talk to some people online, they would say, yeah, but that's how it's always been. Really? Even TOS, that was really Captain Kirk's story? Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura had nothing to do with the story other than to support Captain Kirk? Really? TNG was the Picard story? And Riker, Data, LaForge, Worf did nothing to support Captain Picard? Captain Sisko? Really? That was the center of Deep Space Nine? Really? And I could go on through all the Star Trek iterations, but for some reason in this series, everything, she is the nexus of everything, Michael Burnham. And so that's why they didn't have time to introduce any other characters of any consequence, because even the ones they have that are legacy characters, like Dr. Culber or Stamets, they're still background. They still don't offer anything useful. I just do not understand why everything has to be around Michael Burnham. And then when you try to argue and say to some people online, that's not how it's supposed to be, and they would say, Kirk was always at the center of every TOS episode, and he was at the center of a lot. I'm not saying he wasn't, but not every single episode. When my favorite character of TOS is Scotty, and that's a secondary character, then they must have spent some time on secondary characters for me to get to know them.
Yeah, because some of my favorite episodes from TNG are the ones that actually center around Data and Geordi, especially when they're going and just doing like a one-off thing in the holodeck. I found those character development episodes to be the most enjoyable for me. Also with Voyager, 7 of 9, I enjoyed the episodes where they developed her character more. So you can't say that was just the Janeway show, because it wasn't. Whereas with Discovery, yeah, there were a few episodes here and there where they would try to develop like Detmer, but that was like one episode, I don't know how many seasons ago. She's not even on this final end of this season. They barely did anything to develop her character at all. And she got like one episode, like half an episode, like 3 or 4 seasons ago. So even the ones that they did do some token effort to develop them a little bit after I think they got complaints about them not doing that, they even with that just put in half an effort. They didn't really do anything with them, because I couldn't tell you anything about Detmer at this point other than she's not on the show anymore. And that's sad, because like the show is missing nothing by her not being there.
She lost her eye in that war Michael Burnham started, but we never are allowed to talk about that.
Yeah.
And the second thing I'm going to give credit, the first was the visuals. The second thing, and I know this is a low bar, but considering what they did this season, I want to give credit. At least this episode, they weren't trying to rewrite Michael Burnham's history. As low as that is, at least that's what they didn't do here. They weren't trying to state that Michael Burnham did some other things than what she did in season 1.
That was nice for a change. It really was. However, I would also add to that, it was kind of weird how she and Book took that moment on the Breen ship to both admit that their relationship failed because they were afraid of failing the other. I mean, that was really, really weird.
Michael Burnham, the reason her relationship failed, and will always fail whenever she tries to have one, she's a narcissist. If she would have worked with Book last season when he was trying to go after 10C and actually spoke in a way about how she got distracted by her own internal stuff and that she wasn't seeing the Klingons correctly. So instead of being in opposition to Book, if she would have came in as a supporting partner and saying, look, I've been there. I know it seems like you're doing the right thing. That's why Michael Burnham failed. It's not because I was scared of letting you down. It's that you're a narcissist. That's why your relationship fails. And unless Book likes being around a narcissist, this will never work. I don't know anybody who wants to be around a narcissist, except maybe themselves. Maybe Michael Burnham can use the progenitor technology to clone herself, and then she can get together with herself. But even then, I think those two would fight each other all the time because they'd have a power dynamic on who's the most important thing in the universe.
Yeah.
Now, that's pretty much the only positives I'm going to give, because even the Rayner stuff, although I say they didn't rewrite Michael Burnham, just so we're aware, Tilly is a great leader. Rayner said so. In fact, Tilly's great leadership qualities that she counseled Rayner on in this episode was, as he was on the bridge in a battle situation, he was pacing on the bridge, and Tilly told him to sit down, you're making the crew nervous. That's the great leadership from Tilly, with all of her experience in all these battles that she's been in, while Rayner has lived decades in this new era of war federation, and Tilly says, sit down. And at the end of the episode, he sat down.
I think they were trying to show that he was getting his mojo back, and that's when he finally sat down. Well, I think that's what it was. He was trying to avoid that captain's chair, and by the end of the episode, he was back to being the assertive captain that he had always been before.
Well, he was always assertive in this episode. I understand what you're saying. The confident, I can make decisions and not question them, because when he got relieved at the beginning of the season, they wrote his character so he was questioning what he did is correct, even though I would argue what he did was correct under a red directive. But the way they did this, and this might have been from Jonathan Frakes, because during the episode, they had Rayner standing with his legs apart, kind of bow-legged, like he was man-spreading on the bridge. But they were doing it in a positive way. It wasn't a way that they were making fun of him, except looking at him, it looked silly. And I just wonder, because Jonathan Frakes played Riker, and as we know, Riker, he would do stuff like that all the time. He would flip his leg over a chair when he was going to sit down, and I just wonder if that was Jonathan Frakes' addition to try to Rikerize Rayner.
I think so. I like to think so anyway, because it also kind of reminded me of like those World War II movies from back in like the 1950s and the late 40s, where you'd have these naval captains who would walk the bridge, and they'd have their chests puffed out, and they'd be walking like that and taking up space with authority. And I think that that was another thing that they were trying to convey with that, which is, I think, how Riker carried himself on TNG, was with that same authority. Now, my real question is, with all of those commanders on the bridge, why did Rayner pick Lieutenant Tilly to be his first officer on this mission?
Because she's a great leader. See, that's the part I didn't understand. I've been asking several seasons, what exactly is Tilly teaching at the academy? And I think this is confirming that Tilly is teaching leadership at the academy. I don't even know how you can have a curriculum around that. That's like one class. I would argue you can't make leaders. You either are or you aren't. Now, you can accentuate what's inside of you, but Tilly's not a leader. She has shown nothing in her that makes her a leader, in my opinion. I think Tilly probably got promoted too quickly, because I'm not even sure she's a lieutenant at this point when it comes to understanding the chain of command and leadership.
Yeah, it was weird, because Rayner gave this whole speech about Tilly, how he'd want her in the foxhole with him, how smart he thinks she is. But then when it came to that positivity chatter crap that she does, that he'd shoot her himself or something along those lines.
Which had me laughing. I wasn't really sure what he was saying, but the way my dark humor took that, I actually did laugh. Maybe it was intended on purpose. Maybe Frakes knew that the way they were setting this up was so ridiculous. Maybe he petitioned for that extra line. I don't know, but it seemed like Discovery writers weren't smart enough to come up with a line like that. So maybe Jonathan Frakes petitioned to have that line put in there.
Maybe the Rayner actor added that himself at the end, because that was one of the most ridiculous blowing smoke up her moments that I've seen in a long time. I mean, that was ridiculous, because Tilly is none of those things. And I'm just going to say this. Somebody needs to let these writers in on a little secret that when it comes to leadership, strong wrong is better than weak right. And Tilly is weak right, like, all the time. And it's because of that incessant chatter that she does, that insecure personality that she has. She has no assertive bones in her body unless it's bitching at somebody.
What she reminds me of, her character. And I realize they're portraying her as somewhat autistic. But does anybody remember the Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise movie Rain Man?
Oh, God.
Because when Tilly goes off on her explanations of stuff, Wapner at 4, Wapner at 4, that's exactly how it comes across. And imagine putting Wapner at 4 in charge of anybody. And that's why I can't understand why they're not either changing the Tilly character or moving her away from a leadership command position and just make her a quirky science person and just be done with that.
Yeah, because she'll run off at the mouth, and then she'll trail off when she figures out people are looking at her like, the hell, shut up. I'm so tired of her insecure verbal diarrhea. Like I said, somebody needs to tell these writers that a character like this, she does not have the command presence necessary to be a proper leader. She just doesn't. And like you just said, if they want to stick her down in some science lab, fantastic, that's where she belongs. But she does not belong on the bridge. She doesn't have what it takes to be a leader.
Maybe on this ship, this crying ship of rejects from centuries ago. But what happens one day when Tilly is moved on to a different starship and she doesn't have the history of these crying cadets? They're not going to listen to her, and she has no ability to lead. So this kind of offset the, hey, we didn't rewrite Michael Burnham. Not that they're rewriting Tilly, but they're adding compliments to her that I have not seen on screen. She still owes Rayner an apology for her lipping off earlier in the season, because that was inappropriate. Somebody who's claiming that she's an expert at leadership, she must know the chain of command. You cannot question authority like that unless it's some sort of ethical dilemma, and that was not the case here. Like, we're going to destroy a village and you've got your subordinates standing up to you and saying, no, that's a war crime. That would be an acceptable standing up to your commanding officer. But just having a disagreement on how he's treating the fellow crew, no, she owes him an apology for that, and we'll never see that. And I would argue, going back to what you said earlier in the analysis here, I don't think this is the only wasted episode. I think this same story, instead of being told in 9 episodes, I think you could have probably told it in maybe 4 or 5 episodes. There's just not enough meat here for a story. They're padding it left and right, because the rest of the story when they were on the Breen ship, we're ignoring most of that because it was stupid. They added some jokes to things as far as distracting people, and they had a scene where Book, to distract one of the Breen guards, was like hitting on him for a date. And there were all sorts of just cringy humor going on. And maybe I haven't paid attention enough. But when Michael Burnham and Adira were in their Breen outfits walking around on the Breen ship, they looked so much shorter than the rest of the Breen. Didn't anybody bother to ask, why do those look shorter than the rest of us?
We hadn't in previous episodes, but in this one I did see, I think it was one of the science Breen standing next to Maul when she was standing in front of the artifact, or whatever you want to call it, the barrel. And that brain was actually shorter than Maul. But previously, yeah, all the soldiers that we saw, not a single one of them was short like that. So they brought in a bunch of shorties just for this episode, probably to try to hide the fact that Adira and Michael Burnham did not fit in.
But it doesn't matter. Like, the whole Breen ship stuff was stupid. Everything that happened on the Breen ship was stupid. What I don't understand, yet again, is the Breen are wearing these environmental suits. But the way they look and the way, as I gave a compliment to, the lighting coming in, is it looks like they're a mixture of an environmental suit and armor. So when Book and Michael Burnham are using their space karate to take out these Breen, and they're all wearing armor, how does that actually affect anybody? You're punching somebody who's wearing a suit. Unless your suit has some sort of mega strength to it, how is that doing anything?
I don't know, and one punch would take some of those guys out.
When you watch American football players, when they have their shoulder pads on, you'll see as they're getting ready to go out on the field, they will punch the crap out of each other's shoulders. And it's not doing any damage because the shoulder pads are absorbing the blows. The whole Breen ship stuff was stupid. During the infiltration, as Molly mentioned, Michael Burnham taking Book off to the side and talking about the relationship at that moment. This goes back to previous seasons when they would do crap like that all the time. I don't want to take credit for this joke, but Molly mentioned Battle of the Binary Holes. The two episodes that started this whole series, the second episode was Battle of the Binary Stars. So we don't know if that's coincidental or if this is planned that way to have some sort of symmetry of what's happening in the whole series. I've argued with Molly that I think it's coincidental because I've seen nothing from these writers to show any sort of cleverness. So I think this is more coincidental. If this was written by better writers, I might actually say, hey, maybe they are looking for symmetry.
Well, considering that they didn't know going into filming this season that this was going to be the last season and they had to go back and rework some stuff, I highly doubt that a pair of black holes, binary black holes, was a late addition. So I think it's accidental that the binary black holes are ending the final season because they didn't know this was going to be the final season. But for some reason, they just really love talking about binaries.
They love the color red in this show. So
well, just wait till they get inside. We don't know what's on the other side of that interdimensional portal.
Probably Picard's mom.
Oh, God.
Hanging from the ceiling. And as Molly mentioned, and I realize this has been done elsewhere, but to give Molly credit, when we were watching this and they were talking about flying up the tailpipe, and Molly looked at me and said, wasn't that done in Space Command? And Space Command are these series of movies that are being made by Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube, and it has Doug Jones in it, Mira Furlan in it,
Robert Picardo,
Bill Mumy,
Bruce Boxleitner.
Yeah. So you can go on YouTube and you can watch the first part of part one if you just search for Space Command. It's a reboot of an older, I think, 1950s serial. But we watched that, I think it was over Christmas maybe, because Mr. Sci-Fi, he gave a screening to everybody around that time, and we happened to watch it. And to give Molly credit, that we went back and looked at the episode, and sure enough, because I didn't remember that that's what they did, but they needed to find a way to get onto this ship that was super powerful, and they went up the tailpipe the same way they did here. Am I saying they stole from Space Command? No, because I'm sure you could find this in a few other properties. But just giving Molly credit that she picked out that from a few months ago and remembered that that's what they did in Space Command.
Yeah, unfortunately, part 2 of the Space Command movie, it's not available on YouTube any longer. So if you want to see it, you'll have to buy it or rent it. Amazon has it, and I can't remember where else. The point is that it is out there and available should you want to see it.
So would I recommend this episode? Again, this is Discovery, So at this point, 5 seasons in, there's just a standing rule of just don't watch this crap. It'll just eat your brain away. But if you're really into punishment and you're like, well, how much punishment is this? This was probably one of the least offensive episodes of the series. The action did move fairly well, but the action moved well in that first episode, if you recall, the Indiana Jones of season 5 episode. I would say this was worth watching, but I'm not sure what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, because the plot didn't really move along that much. All we have now is that Michael Burnham and Mal went through the portal. That's really all you need to know from this, and Saru is in a shuttle heading for Tahal. That's it.
They could have tacked that on at the end of last episode.
Yeah.
Like an extra 10 minutes. This episode wasn't necessary. I'm not claiming they stole from this, but what I am pointing out is if that cylinder that's opened up in space at the end, if that turns out to be something that the Discovery can fly through, this just seems similar to the ring in The Expanse. At this point, this series plagiarizes so much that I just look for it. Even if it doesn't exist, I just look for it. But that storyline where they were walking into that interdimensional space while it was still on the Breen ship, okay, I mean, there are lots of franchises that have done something similar, so that's generic enough that I'm not going to hold it against them. But when that thing went outside and then formed what I believe is going to be a very large interdimensional portal to somewhere else that Discovery is going to fly through, that just reminded me of The Expanse when the proto-molecule left Venus and went off past the inner planets and created that ring that they eventually did interstellar travel through. It felt similar the way they did it, but, you know, that might just be me looking for something that doesn't exist here.
Well, I'll tell you what. It could also be that it's not just an interdimensional portal, it's a port key, and Lord Voldemort is waiting for them on the other side. They're going to end up in this cemetery, and Voldemort's going to do some bad things to them.
You know, if Voldemort wins, I might be on board with that. Because I've had it with this show. They have 1 episode to go. There is no way they're going to sew up this series in a satisfactory way. It is impossible with the amount of garbage and wasted time. They wasted episodes. I know some of you probably get sick of me complaining about this, but they had 2 opportunities to take this season to fix Michael Burnham's character, and they didn't. And they're wasting time on filler episodes. So now we got 1 episode to give us a satisfactory ending here. If that ship Discovery blows up and all those people just go away, I'm fine with that ending. To me, that's a satisfactory ending, is the ship just blows up and everybody on board is lost, and that's the end of the story. I'm perfectly fine with that. And that's how bad this series is that if they lost everybody, I would not be sad. There's not a single character, even Rayner, they ruined him so much that I would not want him to stick around. I'm hoping that Saru can chug his shuttle somewhere so that he can blow up too, so that he doesn't get away.
Oh, I think Tahal's gonna kill him.
That would be nice if he gets blown up too. And then it's all done. Everybody blows up. You know, maybe Michael Burnham ascends to some sort of godhood, which they're setting her up to do that anyway. And, you know, so she's just out there, you know, being a consciousness out there, probably fighting Q and winning. She can kick Q's butt, no problem. And maybe that's just it. And then we just don't talk about this series ever again. It's like Fight Club. The first rule about Discovery is you don't talk about Discovery.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, I don't have anything else to say about this episode. It was a waste. It's a shame because we've got 1 episode left. I don't think they're going to be able to wrap this up in a satisfactory manner. I mean, they can't write single episodes correctly, so why would they be able to take the whole series and wrap it up in the last one? Yeah, it's sad. Obviously, after that last episode, we'll be able to reflect on the series in its entirety. And by then, we'll know exactly where it ends.
I'm hoping a giant blow up. In fact, I'm hoping it blows up and it collapses this whole splintered timeline because I'm sick of this secret hideout timeline. So if it blew up and just destroyed the entire universe and this whole timeline collapsed on itself, I'm fine with that ending. That would be a fantastic 10 out of 10. I would give this series a ton of praise for that last episode saying, you know, it was rough for 4.5 seasons or 4 3/4 or whatever the math would be. But man, that last episode made it all worthwhile. I want to go back and rewatch Discovery so that I know that all these people are going to die in a horrible way. That would make it worthwhile me watching Discovery.
Well, I've wondered if this interdimensional portal is actually a portal to the past, and Michael Burnham is going to go back and she's going to become one of the progenitors, or the progenitor.
Why not?
You know,
Why not?
That's just something that I've been wondering. Or I'm kind of hoping that this portal, because it was growing larger, it's going to suck up both those black holes, and in turn it's just going to suck up this whole universe, and that'll be the end of that.
I'm fine with that too. That's a great ending. I love that ending.
Yeah.
End of story. Discovery's universe is now gone, and all the horrible war crimes and all the horrible crying on ships, all the horrible lack of leadership, all the horrible everything would just be gone, and this series can just go into the discount bins at the dollar store for like 25 cents.
So, I guess that's all I've got to say about that. There wasn't much to talk about with this episode, but obviously, since we're getting to the end of the series, I think this is a good time to start reflecting on what's come before. Anything anyone wants to talk about, put it in the comments, and we'll start this discussion of the end of Discovery one episode early, because this episode was really a waste of time. So, until next week.
Take care.